Hello everybody. I'm sorry, I've been stuck in steps all day. I've a little bit of a throat on me, so I hope you can hear me okay. That's not looking for sympathy now, because I'm probably for a bit of a beating, but anyway, here we go. Right, there's a couple of things I want to cover, and even the comments that I've heard so far have been hugely encouraging, because this is more about what you can do for yourselves for tourism, rather than what anybody else can do for you. And we've looked at this area for quite a while now, and are very heartened by the kind of activities that have happened elsewhere in other towns, where there's been very, very good partnerships between public bodies and local communities, and that's really where things work well. If there's too much expectation on what Fáilte Ireland can do for you, you'll be waiting. If there's too much expectation of what locals can do for themselves as well, it's really about that mix and getting a really good partnership in place between what the state can offer and what public bodies can offer, and what communities can mobilise for themselves as well. And that's really where the sweet spot is, in between the two of those. So hopefully we can come up with some really good solutions tomorrow that are very pragmatic and that are doable, because that's most important of all. There's no point in coming up with ideas and solutions for Carrick-on-Shore that are unachievable or very long term. It's about what can be done very, very immediately, very simply, very cost effectively, and that'll have a long-term impact. That's what's really, really important at the moment. I've worked for the last couple of years on the Wild Atlantic Way project, and on the route identification and the development of that project. And what we found there was that, and it was one of the comments that's already been said, should we look at just our own area, or should we look at a wider area and a lot more cooperation with other bodies as well, and other towns and other areas within the south and the east. And that's certainly the way to go. What we found with the Wild Atlantic Way was we were looking at a drop in visitor numbers year on year in the West Coast. When we looked at it, first of all, we saw that there were 35 different driving routes along the West Coast, only 3 of which actually crossed the county boundary. So counties were very insular looking. They weren't looking beyond their own county boundaries. Places weren't looking out beyond themselves. And we felt that there was a solution there that had to do with scale and singularity. That if it was to become visible in overseas markets, it was too busy, there was too much going on. People really couldn't get a sense of what the west of Ireland had to offer, because there were no single large messages hitting into overseas markets. Our biggest markets are Britain, but 60% of our visitors come from Britain, although that's on the decrease. France, Germany and the US are our 3 other biggest markets. Britain, France, Germany and the US are our 4 biggest overseas markets. And they were finding it hard to get a strong sense of what they would experience when they would go to the rest of Ireland. So hopefully the intention of the Wild Atlantic Way was to cut through some of that and provide a proposition of scale and singularity, which is really about delivering very simple messages overseas to motivate visitors to come here. And then once they come here, they can pick up on the richness and the local diversity and the variety that exists at a local level. But that's not necessarily what motivates them to travel in the first place. So the messages that we send out abroad have to be simple, compelling, and motivating, grabbing people immediately, because people are very tech savvy, very web savvy. People will visit 35 or 40 websites when they're looking for ideas for holidays. And if we don't grab them immediately, we lose them. And it's getting harder and harder to get those motivating, compelling messages out there. So it's about looking at, within the east and the south, we're addressing this whole area, basically a triangle from Louth to Wexford to Cork, that whole area there, which is hugely rich in the chronology of 5,000 years of heritage within Ireland. So if we're looking at the Wild Atlantic Way, the key proposition there is really around a timeless cultural tradition, scenic landscapes, seascapes, wildness, ruggedness, all of that. Within the east and the south, there's a very good counterpoint of actually a very good kind of complementarity, which is around a very rich chronological history, starting in Newgrange 5,000 years ago, the Neolithic period, right through to medieval Viking, Anglo-Norman, all that very, very rich history that has a propensity within this area. And that's what we want to lead out on. We're currently working on a proposition around that with Tourism Ireland, with other agencies. There's already been some consultation that some of you may well have been involved in within this room, and we hope to be able to deliver that by the end of the year, which will go to the markets early next year. And then there's obviously Dublin, which is a strong single proposition in its own right, and something around lakelands and inland waterways, which is a fourth one, which will be probably the year after next before that gets developed strongly. But Wild Atlantic Way in the east and south, it's yet to have a name. We're hoping to come up with some sort of, equally catchy name as was Wild Atlantic Way. I'm not sure what exactly it'll be just yet. There are more creative people than I working on that at the moment. The key questions to keep in mind for tonight and for tomorrow as well is who is your visitor? Do you really know who's coming? I mean, there's 9,500 people coming to Ormond Castle every year at the moment. Okay, it's not a big number. It's got potential for growth, but it's very important to understand first of all who those people are. We know certainly that for the east and the south that the type of overseas visitor that's likely to be interested in what you have to offer, and you've got lots to offer. You have it in spades. It may be a diamond in the rough, but the raw material is there to work with, and it's about how we work with that, how we refine it, and how we offer it to overseas markets. But certainly, I'm not a marketeer, but we have plenty of marketeers within Fáilte Ireland who do lots of dark magic on things that I don't really understand. But I was brought up in a pub, and the only marketing I've understood is that the labels had to face out. But there are plenty of people within Fáilte who've done lots of analysis, lots of market segmentation around who our visitors are, where our best bet is in terms of overseas marketing. And there's a very imaginatively titled segment of tourists called the culturally curious, who tend to be a little bit older and tend to have lots of disposable income, want new experiences in culture and heritage, and what we have to offer in this area, in the south and the east of Ireland, is exactly what they're looking for. We need more of those. There's a very big untapped market of them within our key core source markets, within Britain, France, Germany and America. Plenty of them there. We don't even have to look further beyond than there. What we need to be aware of is what's their journey like. What's the visitor journey within Carrick-on-Suir in particular like? What are the first impressions of the town like? What's their journey through the town, both on car and on foot, and Dave will probably talk a lot more about transport, so I'm not going to go into, too much into that area. But we also need to ask ourselves, how good is the visitor's experience? If you put yourselves in the shoes of a visitor throughout Carrick-on-Suir, and be honest with yourself, how good is that visitor experience at the moment? And what stories can they share? We already heard about a couple of characters, the likes of Black Tom, Ormond Castle itself. The place is falling down with stories. Ireland is a kind of a place that you can't kick over a stone in a field without a speech bubble popping up. The whole country is infused with rich stories, with storytelling, but we're notoriously bad at telling a lot of those stories. We either take them for granted or we forget that visitors will actually have an interest in it. And it's those kind of stories, and sharing those stories are what really make us distinctive and can make places distinctive as well. When I talk about a tourism experience, this is a little bit of jargon now, but a tourism experience is really made up of four components. It's the product, the service, the story, and the narration, how that story is told, and who tells that story and what medium it's told through. For the last 20 or 30 years probably, we've been very focused on product and service. A lot of Fáilte Ireland's initiatives have been product development grants, looking at service excellence, service improvement within the accommodation sector, in the hospitality sector, less so on story and narration. So this is probably the weak bit at the moment that needs a lot more focus, and I think Carrick-on-Suir can certainly do an awful lot within this area here. But having the four components in unison are really what make a memorable tourism experience. And there's an emotional element to all of that as well, because what will make an experience for a tourist memorable will be if you can trigger their emotions, if you can stir up their emotions in a way that if you can relate to them, and if you can provide them with an experience and a story that they won't forget, that's when a tourism experience becomes memorable, and that's what triggers them to share it. So the likes of the Facebooks, the Twitters, all those shareable moments, and all of a sudden those tourists coming to Carrick-on-Suir become your ambassadors for other people as well. Okay, a little bit of text here. I'll fly through this. So what makes up a memorable tourism experience? It's about having a single and comprehensive start point. So in terms of the visitor journey, how do you envisage the visitor winding their way through a typical day if they're visiting Carrick-on-Suir for the day? Do they start with the castle? Do they start with the town? You know, what's your ideal visitor journey? And it's about keeping it simple and having one or two compelling draws into the town. Once you get them here, and you encourage them to stay a bit longer, then it's about looking at, you know, how the rest of how the retail sector, how the businesses in the town treat the visitors, are they friendly to them, do they make them feel welcome and important. Find your best ambassadors to talk about it through social media as well. You probably have a lot of businesses that are involved in tourism, but also businesses that aren't involved in tourism or not think they're involved with tourism but actually are. Making them as your ambassadors as well. So it's not just people that see themselves exclusively within tourism. Offer an exclusive and talkable experience. So how do you want to get visitors talking about the experience within Carrick-on-Suir, and what is that experience that you're offering? Highlight your best stories. I even saw that little plaque on the bridge walking over today with somebody hanging from the bridge, the tragedy of the boat with men, women and children killed and drowned just under the bridge. These are all stories that are while you know, that really enable visitors to get under the skin of Carrick-on-Suir. You know, how do you make them feel that they're getting something special from a visit, that you're sending them off with little gems and little nuggets that they'll never forget and that they want to share with other people when they go back home as well. Let people share their experience live. So what's their Twitter moment? You know, what's Carrick-on-Suir's Twitter moment for a visitor? That's something worth exploring tomorrow. Have all your businesses armed with the same messages, so get them all on track. You know, there's Twitter and Facebook and TripAdvisor are very quiet about Carrick-on-Suir at the moment. I did a little scan of all three of them just this afternoon, and there's not a lot of tourism conversations going on there. There's certainly a great potential to raise the volume there, and that can be done by businesses. And you know, you should start the conversation yourself. Don't expect somebody else to. Also build engaging itineraries instead of listing attractions. You have a huge advantage here because you've just got there's Black Tom Butler now and the Butlers in Carrick-on-Suir. This is just a little plug, so I won't get too much of a beating. This is the Discover Ireland website where we're saying something about Carrick-on-Suir. There's the Farmers Market, the Towpath Walk. Yeah, we could be doing a lot more, and we would certainly hope to. But the Butler Trail is a fantastic initiative because it does that. It looks at Carrick-on-Suir, but it looks at something greater than the sum of the parts as well. It looks at Carrick-on-Suir, Care, Clonmel, and it's really all about creating something like the Wild Atlantic Way of scale and singularity. So it's a single theme. It's, you know, all of a sudden you've got, instead of something disparate, you have something singular, something unifying. And now you've got a critical mass. Now you've got something that will draw visitors in. And even if they never come to Carrick-on-Suir, if they go to Clonmel and Care, the next one down will come to Carrick-on-Suir. And it's about cross-promotion as well. If you are stuck in the mindset that you just want Carrick-on-Suir to be developed and you don't want those visitors going elsewhere, well, you're not going to get very far. You know, it's really about this awful word that the marketing people come up with as well, of co-opetition. Yes, you're in competition, but you also have to cooperate with them as well. Every time I say that word, I promise myself I'll never say it again because it's crass, but anyway, it's got some sense to it as well. And it's something that's epitomised by the Butler Trail. This is the overseas website that Tourism Ireland have, which also highlights Butler Trail. The Facebook, not a lot of activity on it at the moment, but it's a very good start. You may be sick of hearing of the success of the Greenway, and I'm sure Simon's going to draw on it later on as well, so I won't say too much about it now. But the only reason I'm highlighting it is because on one level, and I know you've got a Greenway coming here between Carrick-on-Suir and Clonmel as well, which is a fantastic opportunity. You've basically got two trails now. You've got the Butler Trail and you've got the Greenway. But unless you sweat them, and unless you do something with them, they will remain pieces of infrastructure that are dry and won't give you any return. What happened with the Greenway was that on the very basic level, all it is a piece of infrastructure. It's just a cycleway. It's nothing special. Okay, it goes through some fabulous scenery. There's great infrastructure on it. There was a lot of investment put in terms of the old railway. But from a public body perspective, And the way the reason I said earlier that if you're waiting for Fáilte Ireland to do everything, you will be waiting, because all a lumpy public authority like that can provide are certain things. You know, they can provide the infrastructure, they can provide the funding for things like that, but they can't provide the experience. The experience has to be provided by local people, by local businesses, and that's what happened with the Greenway. A number of this is actually the website, not of the Greenway itself, but of the Mulroney Park Hotel. It's the one website where you won't find any picture of beds, any picture of the lobby, any picture of a meal, which you find on hundreds of hotel websites. These crowd are getting very savvy, and they realise that people come to an area, they expect to get a good bed, they expect to have a good night's sleep, they expect to get a good meal, they expect the hotel to be comfortable and to be of a high standard, but they want to know what's the experience I'm going to have when I'm staying in that hotel. So it's looking at not the 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. side of it, but what am I going to do from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m.? What's the experience going to be like during the day? And Mulroney Park Hotel were very, very clever. They created something called the Gourmet Greenway, which this is Dermot Mulroney, or Dermot Madigan, who's the general manager of the hotel, with I can't remember that guy, the butcher, Kelly. Yeah, he's a craft producer. The hotel spearheaded something called the Gourmet Greenway. They created a menu in the hotel made up purely of ingredients that were sourced from local food producers and artisan food producers along the Greenway. So you can have an evening meal called the Gourmet Greenway, 4-course menu. The following day then they give you a map of all the producers along the Greenway, and you can go out and cycle and visit them all. An ingenious thing, but it made what was otherwise a one-dimensional cycle route into a three-dimensional experience, and that's really where the trick lay. That wasn't done by Fáilte Ireland, that wasn't done by the local authority, that was done by the businesses themselves along it, realising what the opportunity was and what they could do to create something that could be compelling for visitors to come in. Since then there's been an Adventure Greenway as well, which is a network of adventure providers along the Greenway, and an Artist Greenway, again a network of artists along the Greenway that can be visited while you cycle. So there are opportunities there for you with Clonmel, and in terms of the Butler Trail with Care also, to look at what can you do together, what can be achieved together, and in order to do that you've got to talk to them. So some questions for tomorrow while we're having a walk around is to look at those 4 components, to look at the product, the service, the story, and the narration. In terms of the product, the raw materials are certainly there. You've got the castle, you've got an historic town, it's falling down with character. Okay, it's a little bit, frayed around the edges. There are certainly problems, there's dereliction, there's all those kind of problems that lots of towns have, but they can be overcome. And maybe it's not looking at what problems are unsolvable, but what can be solved and what can we work around. So how can it be improved? Where are the hidden gems? This market segment that we call culturally curious are always looking for the hidden gems. They're looking for the bits that are off the beaten track. Carrick-on-Suir probably itself is seen as off the beaten track, and it's the kind of thing that the culturally curious visitor wants, because they want that braggable experience that nobody else has had. They want to be able to go back home to their dinner parties back in Stuttgart or wherever it might be and say, do you know what, I came across this place. They want to give the impression that they themselves discovered what Carrick-on-Suir has to offer, or what Ormond Castle has to offer, or the stories that they happened upon. And it's about offering these visitors stories and experiences to visitors in a way that they think they're the first people to discover it. In terms of the service, does the visitor feel welcome and valued? The story, what are your main stories? Are the stories easy to access? How are they being told at the moment? Can they be told better? And the narration, who's telling the stories? You yourselves and the businesses in the town need to be the first ones to start telling these stories through Twitter and Facebook and wherever else. And as I said, TripAdvisor, Facebook and Twitter are all fairly quiet at the moment when it comes to this list. So really to sum up is just to say, look, it's not about what you have, it's what you do with what you have that's important. And you certainly have lots of the raw material here, and it's about how do you make the most of it now. So I leave it with that. Thanks.